In many ways, playing Medal of Honor Allied Assault nearly 20 years since it released is illuminating. 2002 was a time before big-budget annual releases with 10-year histories. It was a time before video games had the massive market they do today, and it was a time before Call of Duty. Allied Assault, along with its expansions, Spearhead and Breakthrough, are relics, representations of a games industry that no longer exists, in a style of game that I'm not sure is really made anymore. Famously, members of 2015, the studio behind Allied Assault, left to form Infinity Ward and developed the first Call of Duty. So while a relic it may be, Allied Assault is simultaneously part of the foundation of the games industry we have now, and a time capsule, showing off a mix of genre, style, and tone largely left to the past. Not to mention, even while Spearhead and Breakthrough were developed by separate teams, more than a few scenes provide quite the sense of deja vu, perhaps coincidentally so. Personally, my nostalgia for Allied Assault is boundless, though it's definitely one of those games that, in memory, seemed so much more complicated, grand, and dense than it actually is. Of course, that may be true for everything when remembered nostalgically. It's interesting to consider Allied Assault within the context of its own release window, too. By 2002, Half-Life, Halo Combat Evolved, Unreal Tournament, and previous Medal of Honors had pushed the limits of how an action FPS could play and what kind of stories they could tell. Allied Assault entered PC gaming as kind of a stylistic cross-section. Sure, you'll carry an armory's worth of weapons, often swapping between a sniper rifle, SMG, and bazooka in a matter of seconds, but its pace isn't quite as fast as other breakneck shooters of the time. Between weapons, accuracy differs enough, and degrades quickly enough, that firing in short, controlled bursts really does help, as does slowing down and firing while walking rather than running. When you take a hit, the camera jolts violently, and enemies ambush you from around corners, up on balconies, through windows, even jump out from cupboards. Not only does this all create some fun, exciting sequences of action, pushing your mouse to each corner of the pad, but it tempers your character's speed. Those sudden camera shakes makes rushing into enemies inconvenient, and maybe a tad nauseating. Given a few hours, you may find yourself leaning around corners and checking angles in a way that doesn't feel like a bombastic shooter at all. Vehicle and heavy weapons sections, especially as you get into Spearhead and Breakthrough, give Allied Assault a potent shot of spectacle, but these scenes lack the dynamics and open-ended design of other vehicle sections you'd find in something like Combat Evolved. So while it's tough to say that these games were innovative purely from a mechanical standpoint, I don't really think that was the point either. These are single-player campaigns of action and adventure, of daring raids and dramatic last stands. And these levels are glimpses of the cinematic grandeur of Call of Duty's and Uncharted's that would come years later. From Allied Assault's Omaha Beach landing to the Battle of Kazarine Pass and Breakthrough and holding the line at Bastogne and Spearhead, I think it's big moments like these that endeared Allied Assault in so many memories. Perhaps more importantly, these scenes aren't just cinematic fluff, and each game, specifically Allied Assault, noticeably changes the context around you between levels. You're constantly handed different weapons, surrounded by a new environment, and dropped into scenarios that encourage you to switch up playstyles. At one point, you're fighting through a snowy Nazi base, the level alternating between tight quarter shootouts and wide open fields between buildings. Fortunately, you happen to start the level with a Springfield sniper rifle. A few missions later, your assignment is to break into a Nazi mansion and gather intelligence on their new tank. So here's a shotgun. Go nuts. These levels are designed to keep you swapping weapons, carving left and right turns in what could otherwise be a straightforward shoot 'em up. It's variety done often and done well. It's not always perfectly executed, and there are plenty of poorly aged sections where the difficulty skyrockets. Late in Allied Assault's campaign, there's just a phenomenal escort mission featuring NPCs who care very little about their own well-being. Sniper's Last Stand, another Allied Assault gem, might be the most famous example. It's a crumbled village teeming with randomized snipers who take full advantage of all the awkward angles and sightlines. With little spare health lying around, what could be a short stroll becomes a minutes-long slog filled with quick saves and retries. It was here I finally had to crack open the console and enable some cheats, another relic of an era gone by. The bazooka team you need to link up with at the end wasn't spawning, so I was forced to blast through the end-of-level doors with my own console-delivered bazooka. But I did beat Sniper's Last Stand myself, after many many retries. What really elevates the excitement of Allied Assault's cinematic visuals is Michael Giacchino's brilliant score, which is, if not at least in my mind, one of the greatest video game soundtracks of all time. Giacchino, whose work includes all of these great movies, had produced the music for the first two Medal of Honors, and while some tracks were recycled for Allied Assault, what's added is just as heroic, energetic, and bold as the previous entries. In Giacchino's score, you hear a John Williams-inspired mixture of Star Wars and Indiana Jones, hopeful marches, floaty flutes, and a constant return to that great Medal of Honor melody introduced in the first game. Absent this soundtrack, the campaign can feel somewhat empty and unemotional. It doesn't help that each campaign's main character is a silent protagonist, at least endgame, and that there aren't so much other living characters as there are just NPCs you fight with. Though one exception could be made for Major Grillo. Early on in Allied Assault, Grillo kinda takes Lieutenant Powell under his wing, and there are some really fun set pieces he plays a major part of. When he's killed at the beginning of Mission 2, the soundtrack fades away and all you're left with are the hisses of wintry wind and German soldiers gearing up for a fight in the distance. In this case, the absence of a soundtrack, along with something happening to a character we kind of know, combines into a solid attempt to elicit an emotional response. It's the moment Powell is left on his own, a lone soldier pit against an overwhelming enemy force. Allied Assault's Omaha Beach at the beginning of Operation Overlord does something similar. The scene as a whole, frankly speaking, is just Saving Private Ryan. A lot of the dialogue is similar. There's a soldier setting explosives to clear a path for tanks, and a brief sniper section while moving between bunkers. That said, the bluntness of Allied Assault's Omaha Beach is really interesting. Without Giacchino's soundtrack, all we hear is gunfire, screams, and bullet impacts. You start off shuffling through waist-high water and only have moments to hop between cover before enemy fire engulfs you. It's a stark pivot away from the Indiana Jones excitement of other levels, and the mission's difficulty adds to that effect. I find it hard to imagine a tonal shift this heavy working today, though. Allied Assault takes you from infiltrating a German U-boat and making a daring escape to a black screen with white text signifying that it's D-Day and it's time to be serious. It's a little jarring, but the effort to be serious is sincere. Spearhead and Breakthrough largely continue Allied Assault's adventurous tone, leaving Operation Overlord's grit and chaos behind, with a few notable exceptions. At the beginning of Spearhead's Battle of the Bulge, you're sprinting from foxhole to foxhole, avoiding artillery fire. It ends with a desperate frontline stand against a German attack that creeps forward through a dense fog. Unlike the silent protagonists of Allied Assault and Breakthrough, Spearhead's Jack Barnes is the only main character to have a voice, and played by Gary Oldman, no less. Barnes doesn't have any in-game dialogue, but does speak between levels. He even recites poetry in a rugged Ernest Hemingway kind of fashion.
Confident and powerful, they strike at our lines, but we beat them back, fighting for time. Berserk with fury, they are hitting us now. Flesh against steel. We'll hold. But how?
Of the two expansions, Breakthrough probably represents the largest shift away from Allied Assault's core, and that's pretty much all due to its difficulty. Almost from Breakthrough's beginning, health and ammo are scarce, creating awkward, even comical difficulty spikes, and necessitating backtracking in a game that shouldn't need it. Breakthrough attempts to retain Allied Assault's cinematic spectacle, the surprise enemy encounters and dramatic last stands, but doesn't give you the necessary health and ammo to make those moments dramatic. Instead, they're just really hard, and that drama is lessened every time you have to reload a save, listen to the same dialogue, and shoot the same dudes. Escaping enemy pursuers with Klaus Neffler bobbing and weaving through alleyways and rooftops is one of Breakthrough's better moments, but then Neffler has to unlock a door and bad guys attack from multiple angles and lob grenades, and you may not have enough ammo to protect him, and the entire moment just slams into a brick wall. After some googling and scrolling through super old forum posts, it appears Breakthrough's difficulty may have been by design, and this is poor design. The concept of making a difficult shooter isn't unreasonable, but Breakthrough's solution is, at best, inelegant. The most enjoyment I got out of it was finding actual back in my day posts from 2003, evidence that get good toxicity has existed for eons, at least in video game years. Today, the Medal of Honor IP resides mostly in and as history, and that goes for the kind of game Allied Assault is, too. Not just the cinematic action-adventure FPS, but one that toes a line between a breakneck early 2000s shooter and one that emphasizes the spectacle of its surroundings, the drama of its set pieces. With Allied Assault, however, what's unquestionable is its legacy. From 2015 Inc. came Infinity Ward, and from Infinity Ward came Call of Duty, and from Call of Duty came the transformation of gaming into the multi-billion-dollar cultural behemoth it is today.